cow. I am so delighted about this session because this is a fulfillment of a dream that I've had for over 4 years. Many of you know how Dr. Mik Kersten and my thinking have been influenced by Dr. Carlota Perez, who wrote the incredible book, Technological Revolutions and Financial Capital. Her book provides an incredible language and historical context for how to think about the upcoming age of software and data, and her concepts have very much seeped into the language of this genius. As I mentioned, for years, I thought it would be amazing if she could share her wisdom with the DevOps enterprise community. And thanks to my friend, Dr. Mik Kersten, we were able to make this happen. It turns out Mik has been having frequent calls with her, and after a year of trying, we were able to make this work. You're going to see an amazing discussion that Mik and I were able to have with her. You'll learn about why, even in this time when we are likely in the worst economic, social, and health crisis in generations, she remains convinced that the best times are almost certainly still to come. She has such a hopeful vision of what the age of software and data will herald in, setting the stage for an even longer and more prosperous economic expansion than after World War II, which has been the largest expansion the world has seen yet. In this discussion, we talk about why the frenzied innovation of the last 20 years in technology are not going to last forever, why Professor Perez is still so optimistic with some qualified pessimism, what macroeconomic trends are likely in the decades to come, and her observations of the incredible effects of the global pandemic. But before that, I'd like to turn it over to my friend Mik to educate all of us on the works of Professor Perez. Mik.
Thank you, Gene. As I was writing Project to Product, I realized that both you and I were just struck by how the world of technology and this entire ecosystem was resulting in this world of have and have not. So we've seen in the State of DevOps survey that the best are just getting better and better and are pulling further away from the herd. We see this in what stock indices look like. We see this in companies like Amazon basically triggering and causing the disruption that resulted in the retail apocalypse that was exacerbated further by COVID-19. And we've also seen companies trying so hard to keep up. Companies like the ones on the right here, key parts of the enterprise DevOps ecosystem, who have been getting better and better. But the bottom line is that at the current rate of disruption that we're seeing, over half of the S&P 500 are predicted to be replaced in the next 10 years. So as I was writing Project to Product, I was wondering, has this ever happened before? And it was then that Gene introduced me to the work of Dr. Carlota Perez to help me understand the historical context of the work that we're all doing and why understanding her work and her models is so important to understanding our place in history and how we can better plan for the future. Now, I'll give you a really quick summary of Dr. Perez's work. So we basically moved from the Industrial Revolution around every 50 years since then. Over those 250 years, we've seen a new technological revolution take hold, culminating now with the age of software and digital and coming out of the age of oil and mass production. And what's so interesting about Dr. Perez's models is the three distinct phases of each revolution that she defines. We go through the installation period where some new means of production becomes cheap and some small set of companies and innovators and entrepreneurs get very good at it. So think back over 100 years, back to when Henry Ford figured out that you could put electricity into the center of a plant, move off steam, basically deprecate steam and make that be the legacy, and then scale production to what we now know as modern car production. At that point, there's this period of that financial capital is trying to get these 10x returns on that new innovation, on that new means of production. At that point in Detroit alone, there were over 300 car startups in that one city. So you get this massive frenzy. And then some companies get very good at scaling that new means of production. So that's what we know of as the car logos we know today, the Fords, the GMs, the BMWs, and so on. And then you get to this turning point where those companies get so good that they actually disrupt even further. Those startups start disappearing, they start getting consolidated and acquired. And what's so fascinating right now is that we've been able to apply Dr. Perez's models to what we know today of the age of software and data. So we're moving from the spirit of create this destruction to a point where some companies have mastered software at scale. The FANGs here, so the tech giants, Facebook, Amazon, Netflix, Google, Baidu, Alibaba, and Tencent in China, these 9 companies, all of these together, they all have learned how to manage at a business level and how to innovate around building line code bases. And they've gone so good at this that collectively, they actually have an economy the size of Japan's. So this is their equivalent to the world's 3rd largest economy and just growing. Now, once we hit these turning points, there's massive disruption, but what happens is that we get into this golden age that Dr. Perez calls this period of wealth generation, where other companies adopt these practices, adopt the practices that have really been curated, created by the enterprise DevOps community. So the quicker that we bring these practices both into the technology and the business and operations portions of how we run our organizations, the faster we will get into a better kind of this golden age that Dr. Perez predicts, and the fundamental reason for her optimism. So the question is, how do we get there? And in her work, she's actually identified each of the different managerial portions of each of these revolutions. So we went from factory systems to subcontracting to Taylorism and Fordism. And yeah, the fact is that Taylorism won't quite get us there. We know that project management is not the right model in terms of creating these innovative organizations that can really thrive in the age of software and data. So the question is, what really brings us there? And I think we've heard Jean say this multiple times on the enterprise DevOps stage, is that we need to get to this point where we have dynamic learning organizations, where we take these technology practices that have been mastered and evolved by this very community and apply them not just to technology, not just to IT, but to the organization as a whole, to the way that we evolve and run our entire businesses and the way that we engage with the market, exactly how those tech giants have done. So with that, I am so thrilled, like Jean, that we've got Dr. Perez telling us what's behind her models, telling us why she's so optimistic about the future, and really helping us understand that there are two paths to go down here, and how we can really think and have the mental models to help bring ourselves and organizations down this path of the golden age of wealth generation.
I think I need to talk about both, yes. The reasons for my optimism are historical. All my work on technological revolutions has shown me that there is a pattern, that technological revolutions begin in a particular way, which is